Yeah, and William Jensen, known typically on the Open Series for playing Sneak and Show, and wanted to play Brian Bronduin's Blue-White-Red Miracles deck.
Yeah, so here we see Shane Remelt. He's got 2 swords in play, a Sword of Fire and Ice, a Sword of Feast and Famine, along with a Mishra's Factory and a bunch of other lands. Huey just has lands in play. We did see a Snapcaster Mage from Shane get Red Elemental Blast from Huey, so let's see what Shane has as a follow-up. Looks like we're going to see Mishra's Factory get activated. Is a sword going to get equipped? Will that resolve? And yes, it looks like the sword will get equipped. Both swords will get equipped, although Huey does have another Swords to Plowshares, so Shane will lose his Mishra's Factory. He's going to pump it, though.
Gain 1 more life.
Gain 1 more life.
You never know.
Seeing all the angles.
And I really like Mishra's Factories in a lot of these type of decks. We saw Paul Rietzel last week in Los Angeles. He added a couple of Mishra's Factories to his Death and Taxes list. Not something you see all the time. In an equipment-based strategy, I think Mishra's Factory is quite powerful, and it's also just a generically powerful Magic card. It's going to be good for you over the course of a tournament.
So Huey is down a game. This is game 2. Shane was able to pull out the first game. Both players are at X and 1. So a win here is very important to keep their top 8 hopes alive. Like you said, X1 and 1 is no guarantee. So both these players might have to win their next 2 rounds. But Shane Remelt does have double Lightning Bolt to deal with the Jace the Mind Sculptor. He has to expend 2 resources to do that, and it looks like he just has a Batterskull left in his hand. Meanwhile, Huey has 5 cards in his hand, all of which seem to be gas. And here we're going to see a Batterskull of his own.
Yeah, Huey right now seems just flush with really powerful tools. A Vendilion Click in hand, a Wear Terror in case one of the pieces of equipment that Shane has ever gets to be threatening, a Detention Sphere, a lot of good catch-alls right now.
Yeah, so Shane has that Batterskull, and it looks like he drew a Snapcaster Mage as well. So some options here. Looks like we might just see a Batterskull. I'm not sure if he has enough mana to equip as well, but no, it looks like he's going to pass back and hold up Snapcaster Mage. And William draws a counterbalance, so he's going to send with the Batterskull, dropping Shane to 20, moving William up to 19. And there's that counterbalance. He does not have Sensei's Top, but again, counterbalance can be problematic.
Yeah, and in this matchup, even though these players have a lot of similar tools, Shane has to be the aggressor. The threat of counterbalance means that William has a pretty substantial edge if the game goes long enough. And so Shane needs to get a move on here. You can see when the game gets to this sort of space, where the game's gone on for a long time and Stoneforge Mystics have been cast and players are exhausting each other's resources, that Jensen just seems to have better tools.
So Shane does have a creature in play that he can equip with those swords. He also drew a Jace the Mind Sculptor. However, we know that William has a Wear and Tear, so this could be a pretty bad turn for Shane if he tries to attack. Obviously, he thinks it won't be able to get blocked by the Germ token because of the Sword and Feast and Famine. Unfortunately, it looks like that will get destroyed. And now the Germ token is free to block if it chooses to.
Yeah, and I imagine Jensen's going to try it again. Time is on his side here, so I would be surprised to see him not block, A, because of the sword trigger, and B, because he could just reset this Batterskull and go through all the motions again.
Exactly. So Huey doesn't really lose much on this exchange. He is able to destroy a sword and kill one of the Shane's creatures. Shane does have that Batterskull left in his hand and a Jace, but here we see Huey. He's just going to cast a Stoneforge Mystic and search up another piece of equipment. Let's see if he has any left in his deck here. He's got that Batterskull in play, so nope, it does not look like he has another piece of equipment. Oh, he has a second copy of Batterskull, so.
Yeah, this is a defining feature of this list. I believe Brian Bronduin, the last time I saw him play this deck, had 1 Batterskull main, a second Batterskull on the sideboard for really long games, and Brian has actually gone ahead and added the second Batterskull to the deck. A couple factors here. One is the game drags out long enough, you can go ahead and just draw and cast them. That's fine. And secondly, it puts another 5 in the deck, so counterbalance hitting Force of Will is more likely to happen.
Mm-hmm. So Jace the Mind Sculptor enters play for Shane, and counterbalance trigger will go on the stack. William does have a Brainstorm, but he's going to try to blind hit it, and it just reveals a Swords to Plowshares. So it looks like that Jace will resolve.
And I don't think that Jensen's terribly worried about this, as he has Vendilion Click in hand, so he has an efficient way to get that Jace off the table.
Yeah, so Shane really didn't have a way to actually protect his Jace, because William always had that Vendilion Click, so he's going to be able to deal with the Jace. And here we see Vendilion Click get cast. Shane just has a Supreme Verdict and a Batterskull, but he's going to target himself actually with the Vendilion Click.
Yeah, and this is some pretty common counterbalance operations of putting equipment back into your deck so future Stoneforge Mystics still have targets.
So, yep, Vendilion Clique attacks Jace, and we're going to see that Stoneforge Mystic again search out that Batterskull that is in the bottom of William's deck. So William just going through all the motions here, completely dominating this game. He just has so much card advantage.
Yeah, and you see Shane has a copy of Supreme Verdict in hand, so he has an answer to some of the stuff that's going on the board. But long term, it's not clear how he's supposed to generate all the defeat all the card advantage that Jensen's generating here.
Yes, he has that Supreme Verdict, like you mentioned. It looks like we might see that, but no, he's going to cast Batterskull. And William has a Batterskull in his hand and a Brainstorm, so he will be able to counter that Batterskull.
Yep. And Shane knows now that this 5 is going to get reset on top of the deck, and the value train continues unopposed for Jensen in this game.
Yeah, so let's see. Did he put the Batterskull on top? Yes, he did. So Batterskull gets countered by another Batterskull. So William's going to untap. He'll redraw that Batterskull here, and he's going to play an Arid Mesa. William has plenty of options. That Batterskull does not have a Germ token on it, but Huey decides he doesn't want to actually equip anything, so he's just going to attack Shane for 3, dropping him to 17.
Yeah, he has some better stuff to do with his mana.
Shane has a Supreme Verdict, and now he draws a Venser, so he's going to lead with a Supreme Verdict here, dealing with both the Vendilion Clique and the Stoneforge Mystic.
And Jensen's not really that concerned about killing Shane particularly quickly as he has such a stranglehold on this game. So you're seeing him be a little more cautious, making sure he has mana at his disposal to, for example, reset his Batterskull. And that's why you saw last turn Jensen not equip the Batterskull onto one of his available creatures, because he's not trying to play that kind of game right now.
Yeah, with Shane at 17, he really doesn't need to try to be that aggressive. Like you said, he's just grinding him out with all this card advantage. So William sacks an Arid Mesa, finds a Tundra, and he passes back. And now he's going to draw a card. It looks like it's a Flooded Strand. He's got double Batterskull, Detention Sphere. It looks like another Stoneforge Mystic to go along with the Swords to Plowshare. And what does he want to do here? He's going to lead with that Batterskull. At Batterskull, Germ Token enter play, the BBD Germ Token. We are going to get another Invitational token pretty soon. And True Name Nemesis gets cast, so finally Shane draws one of the cards in his deck that can help him pull out of this.
Yeah, if anything can help him steal this game, it's got to be True Name Nemesis. His hope now is that Jensen randomly can't interact with this card, and he's able to take the game.
Yes, so True Name Nemesis comes down. We know that Huey does have a Detention Sphere for the equipment, so obviously True Name Nemesis plus equipment can be very, very problematic for Huey's deck, although Huey does have an answer. He also has Terminus in his deck, so Terminus is another card that could potentially deal with the True Name Nemesis.
Yeah, he has Terminus in his hand right now, which he could just hard cast, doesn't even need to Miracle it at this juncture. He has a Detention Sphere to contain the sword if he's feeling so inclined, so even though True Name Nemesis is one of the better draws in Shane's deck at this stage, Jensen's still armed with a lot of reasonable answers to take care of it.
So let's see what William wants to do here. Does he want to actually try to cast Detention Sphere here just to deal with the equipment, or does he want to just cast Terminus? Obviously, Detention Sphere is very valuable in this match because it's a way for him to deal with Jace the Mind Sculptor. And yes, Huey does try to cast Terminus here, and Shane does have a Venser in his hand, so he can actually bounce the Terminus back to Huey's hand. This will give him one turn to equip True Name Nemesis with the sword, dealing almost 7 damage to Huey and drawing a card.
Yep, it's a shot. I mean, you know, Shane's way behind in the game, but he's doing what he can to soldier on.
So, Shane, yeah, just because of True Name Nemesis, really that card is just so good that plus equipment can randomly win any game, even games you think you're losing. So, Counterbalance gets triggered and just reveals a Stoneforge Mystic. So it looks like the Jace will resolve. And he's actually going to bounce the True Name Nemesis to his hand. So he doesn't want to try to get some card advantage off of it. He wants to just try to permanently deal with that Terminus.
Yeah, the hope here, again, Shane's playing to his out, which is just hoping that Jensen's hand or deck randomly can't beat a True Name Nemesis and it can steal the game.
Yes, and currently it can't really deal with True Name Nemesis. It can deal with the equipment, though. So True Name Nemesis can easily get raced by a Batterskull, so that's the real problem here, is that Shane won't be able to rely on that True Name Nemesis plus Sword and Fire and Ice. He doesn't know that, obviously, so playing to his outs. Huey doesn't reveal any equipment. He only has those 2 batter skulls, which are both either in play or in his hand, so there's a fail to find there. Shane draws his card for the turn. It is another land, Arid Mesa. True Name Nemesis is going to get cast, and Sensei's Divining Top gets revealed. So True Name Nemesis will resolve. However, Huey does finally find a Sensei's Divining Top. So this is going to be pretty effective for him. He's going to now he has the Sensei's Divining Top counterbalance combo.
Yeah, this is now the lock is really getting applied here. It's very unlikely Shane's going to be able to sneak anything of relevance in the game for the remainder of the game unless he gets quite fortunate. And of course, Jensen still has the ability to reset his batter skull.
Yeah, so he still has that Stoneforge Mystic that is active because he cast it last turn. So he has the second batter skull in his hand, which can come into play now. And he can activate top as well. So that's what we're going to get. Activate top, revealing Brainstorm, Counterbalance, and a land.
And Brainstorm's a really nice one to have access to with counterbalance to play for a variety of reasons. Of course, it's extremely powerful on its own and also allows Jensen to brainstorm back cards in his hand that correspond with the casting cost of a spell that Shane has on the stack.
Yeah, so because of the batter skull, True Name Nemesis really can't afford to attack here because it's not winning that race. And looks like we're just adding up everything and making sure that everything was tapped correctly. And he has enough mana for everything. So looks like, yes, that is correct. So we're going to proceed to untap and take Huey's turn.
And right now you're seeing one of the concerns of playing a deck like Blue, White, Red Miracles is time. It's hard to finish the rounds in time. There's so many small operations. Games go long. And just in terms of turns and number of game actions, you see Jensen down a game right now, 12 minutes and counting on the clock. Is there a way for him to win this game and then a following game in time? As I know that Jensen took a loss early in the tournament. I asked him at one point what his record was. The response was 3-1, so he took a loss relatively early at some point. And so his tiebreakers now are becoming a concern, and the time on the clock is a factor as well.
Yes, he has 2 batter skulls now. So now with 2 batter skulls, one will get through, even though True Name Nemesis can block one. So he's going to start to put pressure on Shane. And yeah, I'm with you. Time has to be a factor, especially if you're Shane. You kind of know that you have very little chance of probably winning this game. Do you just concede here to kind of conserve time and try to win the third game, or do you just drag it out?
Well, a lot of it depends on my breakers. Do I feel a draw puts me in a position to still win the next round in top 8? And also, do I feel like I can still win game 3 in time, given the current pace of game 2?
Yeah, given the fact that Shane has more creatures, he's got more clicks, True Name Nemesis, Snapcaster Mage, Stoneforge Mystics. He obviously has the ability to probably win a little faster than Huey. So he's got to be feeling a little bit more comfortable with less than 11 minutes left in the round. But again, it's going to be tough for either of these players to win a third game, given the way that these decks kind of play out. So Shane is constantly just taking 4 damage from one of the batter skulls. It looks like he did draw a Vendilion Click, and there's a red Elemental Blast as well. So let's see how he wants to play this.
Yeah, the red Elemental Blast provides Shane no help here in the face of Divining Top plus Counterbalance. It's not even clear he wants to cast the Vendilion Click into what is most likely a Divining Top activation to take care of it as well.
Yeah, all he can really do here is kind of slow William down a little bit, but yeah, he can't really stop his attack. There's really not much that Shane can do here. So looks like we're just going to go to game 3 here, and both players are going to have less than 10 minutes left to try to finish this third game.
Yeah, with sideboarding factored in as well, it's going to be a challenge for this match to finish in time.
Yeah, and it's kind of unfortunate if they draw, because not only does that mean they'll have to win their final round, that's just a win for a chance to make top 8. Like you said, given the number of players and the number of rounds, X1 and 1 isn't necessarily a guaranteed lock for top 8.
Yeah, and mental fatigue is also just a factor at this stage of the tournament as well. You've been playing, both players have been playing, you know, decks that are going to go long, play grindy games, and there's only so many rounds that you can have go to time or close to it before it starts affecting your play.
Yeah, it's going to start dry. The days get pretty long. The convention center starts to clear out. Pretty soon you're sitting at a table by yourself.
You can feel
the
bugs
loneliness.
crawling. Yeah, of course.
Thinking about that drive or flight home. It's yeah, it can get pretty late very quickly.
Looking at the same 3 cards for your Divining Top for 6 straight turns or whatever. Hallucinating, thinking back to previous rounds, not being able to separate the various fetch land Sensei's Divining Top, Stoneforge Mystic, Jace activations. It all blurs together into the same soup.
You always hope for a nice, easy round. Unfortunately, in Legacy, there are very few easy rounds.
I mean, there are some decks, the combo decks of the format, when they get to play against decks that don't have Force of Will, generally get some pretty easy rounds. And Wasteland can also lead to some pretty easy rounds, as it can render your opponent non-functional pretty early in the game. But anytime both players are able to play a game, the format is so complicated, there's so many subtle nuances and interactions. The games have a habit of going fairly long in terms of time, if not turns, and are mentally taxing as well.
William Jensen, obviously no stranger to long tournament days, a lot of Sunday success. He's made I think like 4 out of 5 open top 8s in a row.
Yeah, he had a run in 2013 where he was just posting top 8s every single weekend, and usually both in the Standard and Legacy Open. Most of that run was done with Sneak and Show. That's where he did most of his damage in the Legacy portion.
Yeah, and he's a very quick player too. So if he can win, if anyone can win in this short amount of time, it's definitely Huey. So we'll see what happens here. Both players are opening up with their 7-card hands. Shane is on the play because he lost game 2. So looks like he's going to be okay, and we're off. Shane leads with a Scalding Tarn. And Huey's going to lead with an Arid Mesa. And let's see if this is a turn 1 Sensei's Divining Top. One of the cards that does not speed things up necessarily, but very powerful.
And you can see Jensen's trying to move as fast as possible. He's aware of the time's a factor here, but it's just going to be a challenge when, you look at his hand, there's a fetch land, that's going to be another shuffle. Stoneforge Mystic's going to be another shuffle.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Huey, it looks like he has a really, really strong start of turn 1 Sensei's Divining Top, turn 2 Counterbalance. Unfortunately, that kind of board situation is really only good for the longer game, which he just can't afford to have right here. So Shane's going to sack a Scalding Tarn to find a Tundra, and he's going to cast a Stoneforge Mystic, which will find him a Batterskull.
And you can see both players are trying to shortcut and speed up a little bit. They're aware time is an issue.
So Stoneforge is in play, Batterskull is in Shane's hand, and William is going to have his turn now. Let's see if we're going to see a Counterbalance here, or is he going to try to answer that Stoneforge Mystic right now so that the Batterskull won't be able to come into play next turn?
Well, it's not clear if he even has an answer in his hand right now.
Yeah, it looks like he has his own Stoneforge, and he has one of the Batterskulls in play. So wouldn't be surprised to see a Stoneforge Mystic here, or maybe he wants to just play a Counterbalance first to kind of protect it later on. Because, again, he has one Batterskull, so if he's able to search out a second Batterskull, that's one way he can trump Shane.
Yeah. Again, Jensen just trying to play to what is a theoretical out here, like you mentioned, assembling the second Batterskull and being able to race.
Yes, so Shane here, he's just going to pass the turn back after playing a Flooded Strand. Likely wants to activate Stoneforge Mystic at the end of Huey's turn. And here we're going to see William lead with a Stoneforge Mystic, finding a Batterskull. Now, Shane isn't aware that William has a second Batterskull in his hand, so this could be really good for Huey if we can get it to go.
Yeah, he's going to be behind the 8-ball a little bit, and I think that Shane may have a copy of True Name Nemesis in his hand that complicates things as well.
Yes, it looks like Huey does have a Pyroblast, and he's also going to get a top activation, so let's see how he wants to play this. Pyroblast obviously can counter True Name Nemesis. It can't target it once it's in play, but looks like Shane has a hand of double Jace, Vendilion Click, Stoneforge Mystic, and another card I can't make out. Shane's going to lead by attacking with Batterskull, dropping Huey to 14.
Jensen just taking his lumps for the time being.
So Shane sacrifices Flooded Strand. He's going to find, looks like, a Volcanic Island. And with 4 mana, he could cast one of the Jaces in his hand. So, he's going to find a Tundra instead. And now with 4 mana, like I said, he could cast one of the Jaces. However, William does have a Pyroblast.
And that could be a big tempo swing here for Jensen if he's able to spend a turn, getting his Stoneforge Mystic into play, and then countering Shane's entire turn on the way back.
Oh, wow. So Vendilion Click gets cast instead, possibly as an attempt to steal the Batterskull. And wow, blind flip off Counterbalance reveals the Tension Sphere, and Click is countered. So great hit there for Huey.
Yeah, not only is it a blind flip, it's not just any blind flip, it's a Tension Sphere. So that gives Jensen an answer to this equipment potentially down the line as well.
Yeah, so suddenly, with less than 5 minutes, Huey could potentially pull this one out. Both players have to play a little bit faster. Shane's going to attack for 4. Huey's going to have a Batterskull activation, and that will quickly block the germ tokens, will bounce off each other, and that will be that. Shane has some options. He's going to play a second Stoneforge Mystic. We could see another activation, although this time it looks like Huey's going to sacrifice an Arid Mesa and activate top.
Yeah, he's going to spin, try to find a 2-coster in the top 3 to hold the Stoneforge Mystic for free.
Yeah, Huey has a number of 2-mana casting cost spells, so a reasonable chance that this could get countered. He's going to activate top, looks at 3 cards on top of his library. One of them is a Stoneforge Mystic and Counterbalance and then Terminus, so that will get countered. So Counterbalance gets revealed, and that counters the second Stoneforge Mystic from Shane. And it looks like Shane is going to be forced to pass back here.
Yeah, and you can feel the noose tightening around Shane a little bit, the way the pace of this game is going, but just unclear if Jensen's going to have enough time.
Yeah, it all comes down to how much time they have left. I think Huey's trying to check if they have any extra time, because again, they are feature match. Sometimes they are given extra time based on how they're supposed to come into play, come into the feature match area.
Yeah, occasionally there's some delays switching over and all that kind of stuff. Often the feature matches are the last ones to finish in a round because there's some delay while we're waiting to get everything set up.
Yeah, so looks like Huey's just checking on a judge question. Looks like maybe he might be asking about what the actual time is, given the switchover, etc. Obviously, Huey is in a dominating board position right here. It's not certain that he's going to guarantee to win, but again, with Sensei's Divining Top and Counterbalance, along with a second Batterskull in his hand, you'd have to imagine it's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, once we transition to this stage of the game, Jensen's a really heavy favorite. Shane's deck is a little bit more aggressive. He can steal gains on the back of things like True Name Nemesis, maybe Mishra's Factory and equipment in some spots. But once we're here, where both players have about the same number of resources, but Jensen has Counterbalance, Sensei's Divining Top at the ready, Jensen's a huge favorite. So many of Shane's draws just do not work in the face of top Counterbalance. All of his 1-costers are set off, and because these players have a ton of overlapping pieces in their deck, the likelihood that Jensen finds matching casting costs to counter spells that Shane casts that cost more than 1 is pretty high as well.
Yeah. The best part about a William Jensen feature match is you usually get a Reduke or Owen Turtenwald guest appearance in the background.
Yeah.
This is no different.
Right. Reduke standing there majestically behind his friend, cup of coffee in hand. Ali Antrazi behind Jensen, doing whatever. So yeah, looks like we have the head judge involved. I assume that Jensen is either asking about time or appealing for more time, depending on what the circumstances are. We're going to get that cleaned up, and for now, back to the booth.
Yeah, so, like I said, Huey just looked to be in a really, really good position there, but like you said, when you're playing a deck like Miracles, time is always going to be an issue for you.
Yeah, and that's the thing that separates Joe Lissette from a lot of the Miracles players I watch. Not to say Jensen's playing slow. In fact, he's playing quite fast. And he's 6-1. He has no draws thus far today. Yeah. Even though Counterbalance isn't the deck he plays the most frequently, more known for playing Sneak and Show, as we mentioned before. The deck has a lot of complexity, a lot of operations, by which I mean, Sensei's Divining Top, sack a fetch land, play my Stoneforge Mystic, pick up my deck, look through it again. These all shave seconds and minutes off the clock. And you can see the position Jensen's in now. Usually when we get to this stage, it's game 3. We're looking at time or close to it. The Counterbalance player is the favorite. Mm-hmm. That's why we've gotten to this point, because the games have gone long and this game is looking to drag out as well. So playing the deck quickly and getting familiar with the operations and learning how, not having to think over every Divining Top activation, just knowing I want to land this turn or I want to keep a 2 on top, whatever the circumstances call for, is a big factor in turning a lot of matches that are draws into wins. Because, again, generally speaking, it's in matches where the Counterbalance player would win if the game drew to its natural conclusion.
Yes, so both players, obviously at X and 1, don't really want to draw here, but that doesn't mean that their dreams of making top 8 will be dead. Obviously, X1 and 1 is a reasonable record to make top 8. It just all comes down to those breakers. And you hate to be in the position where you're basically praying to the god of breakers to be good to you.
Well, the other factor here, of course, is when you're in the draw bracket, you're likely to play you're going to play someone else most of the time who has already received a draw. Mm-hmm. Someone who's already received a draw is pretty likely to be playing a deck similar to your own, which compounds the issue that we're seeing right now where both players are playing Stoneforge Mystic decks with a lot of searching and shuffling and so forth, and that magnifies the problem when both players are doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, and again, I think if you're playing Miracles and you're really proficient with the deck, you would love to play against other Miracles players, because that's one of those matchups where if you know what you're doing more than your opponent, you're going to win most of the time. It's very difficult for you to get kind of screwed out of games in that kind of mirror.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we had Chris Van Meter against Joe Lissette during the day one of the Invitational. Chris Van Meter is an excellent Magic player, but not nearly the same experience level with Miracles as someone like Joe has. And Chris looked a little out of his element at times. I mean, Joe was just so much, Joe wasn't even thinking about his decisions. It's just natural operations. Whereas a lot of these decisions, Chris was encountering for the first time or for one of the first few times. And you can notice the gap in experience when it comes to how long it takes people to finish up their operations with the deck.
Yeah, even something like having 2 copies of Entreat the Angels as opposed to just 1, which we've seen most of us play. Joe you could tell he had a very keen awareness of what his deck needed in order to function correctly, and particularly for the mirror match, which is something that we're noticing a lot these days, because there is just so much Miracles running around. Ever since GP Paris and the high win percentage it put up there, we're seeing a lot more Miracle players and a lot more players preparing for Miracles. We saw last round Todd Anderson, or this round rather, Todd Anderson playing Sneak and Show with main deck Jace the Mind Sculptor as a concession to all the Miracles decks out there.
Yeah, by the numbers, Miracles is the best performing deck in Paris, and it's clearly one of the best decks in the format. You have a stable mana base because you want to play a bunch of basics, so Wasteland is less of an issue. Counterbalance, Divining Top locks out a lot of decks. Even Counterbalance plus some Brainstorms is going to be countering at least 1 or 2 spells over the course of the game. So it's a very powerful deck, but again, getting familiar with the operation is so critical to playing in a tournament setting. And when Entreat came out, and that was a card that got added to the Miracles deck. I mean, it was Counterbalanced Divining Top before. Now with Terminus and Entreat the Angels, the deck is classified as Miracles. Part of the reason Joe was so excited about it was not even just about the power level of Entreat the Angels, which is very high in that deck, of course, but the ability to finish matches in time. And before, you were sitting there with Top and Counterbalance playing these exhausting, super dragged out games, and now you actually have some chance of finishing in time. It looks like Jensen did receive a small extension.
So we're back to the match. There is 3 minutes and 30 seconds left in this match. Shane is at 26, and it looks like he bounced his Batter Skull, so he will be able to replay it. Jace the Mind Sculptor gets cast here, and we're going to get a top activation and response, but it's those same 3 cards: Counterbalance, Terminus, and Stoneforge Mystic. So Huey's going to have to use the Pyroblast on it. Jace the Mind Sculptor does get countered, and Shane's going to have to pass back. And again, Shane does have that Stoneforge Mystic, which is active, so he can activate it to put the Batter Skull back into play. So even though Huey's playing as fast as he can, and he has a really dominant board position, it's going to be difficult for him to win in less than 3 minutes here.
That second Batter Skull is a big help.
Yeah, so second Batter Skull comes into play here. He's going to top on his upkeep. And see some new cards because of the shuffle. I think the top card looks to be a Counterbalance. And no, Source of Plowshare. So pretty good draw for him. He'll be able to deal with the Germ Token and then the Attention Sphere, the Batter Skull.
Well, the issue with the Detention Sphere on the Batter Skull is that it's also going to sweep up Jensen's Batter Skulls in the mix, too.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, this is one of the differences between Detention Sphere and Oblivion Ring. 2 times it comes up as a drawback. One is against the card Pyroblast, and then second is in situations like this, where you're trying to cover a card that your opponent also has access to.
So Shane has Batter Skull. It looks like it might be a Sword of Fireness in his hand, along with a Jace the Mind Sculptor. So we're going to see the sword on the Stoneforge Mystic, and it's going to get activated, and Batter Skull will come down. So now, yep, so Shane is left with just a Germ Token, but he can't actually bounce it and then replay it efficiently with the Stoneforge anymore. And with 2 Batter Skulls, we're going to see an equip of one of them, of the Germ Token, and now that's going to come over as an 8/8. The Germ Token will jump in front of it. Both players will gain life. Huey will gain 8. Shane will gain 4. But now William has an 8/8, and Shane is just left with a Batter Skull in play. So he looks like he's going to activate it to bounce it back to his hand. Now he still has a Jace the Mind Sculptor in his hand, so he could bounce the token to further slow Huey down. And at this point in the game, you have to imagine Shane's just all about slowing him down, settling for a draw.
Yeah, I mean, both life totals are fairly high here. It's almost impossible for Shane to win this match in time. Certainly very challenging for him to just win the match at all here. And so I imagine he's going to try to play as defensive a game as possible and just try to eat this clock out and get to a draw and get another shot at it next round.
Yeah, Huey could actually equip his Batterskull to his Stoneforge Mystic, but again, Shane even has a Mishra's Factory in play to block. So with less than a minute now, just not sure Huey's going to be able to do enough damage.
Yeah. And this game does have a feeling where if it went on for a while here, Jensen's a pretty heavy favorite, but just not enough time for him to do everything he needs to do.
Yeah, so we're going to have a Brainstorm activation off the Jace. He sees a Supreme Verdict, Caracas, and another card there, but he's going to put some cards on top of his library, play a Caracas, and looks like we might see Supreme Verdict get cast. So, yep, Supreme Verdict's going to get cast to deal with the Stoneforge Mystic in play, and now Huey can't even efficiently put that Batterskull back into play. So we're about to run out of time. Looks like we're going to run out of time on Shane's turn, so I believe Huey will get turn 1.
Yeah. So the way that time works here is, turn 0 gets announced essentially when the clock goes off. Then there's 5 untimed turns. At the end of those 5 untimed turns, if the match is still proceeding, then it is a draw. Also, either player does have the option of conceding here as well.
Yes, but again, at X and 1, X1 and 1s, you're still technically live to top 8, so it's hard to imagine someone's going to want to concede in this situation, yeah. even though it's not necessarily 100% clear who's favored. I mean, obviously, if I had to guess, I'd say Huey's probably favored here, but still, at X and 1, you're still live even at X1 and 1. So the tension sphere comes down for Huey, targeting Jace the Mind Sculptor. However, Shane does have a Force to Will, so he will cast it, pitching the Snapcaster Mage in his hand.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about, how big of a favorite Jensen is to win this game, and he is, but it's not 100% by any stretch of the imagination. Shane has a Jason play. He has some tools to work with here, and Jensen would be really slow to reset these Batterskulls. So in the meantime, Shane would get a lot of looks with Jace to either find a way to get counterbalance off the table or randomly force through some threats of his own.
Yeah, so that die in the middle of the table, that actually represents the number of turns we're in. So the 2 means we're in turn 2, and there are 5 total extra turns. So Shane is only going to get 1 extra turn after this. He actually activates his Mishra's Factory, equips it with Sword of Feast and Famine, and then attacks Huey. And he's going to replay the Batterskull. And Terminus is the top card on top of his library, of Huey's library. So Batterskull is in play. There is a Germ token attached to the Batterskull. We have just not put the Germ token in play yet, although that Batterskull is equipped with a Germ token because it was just cast.
Well, it's possible Shane missed the trigger, but again, this is not significant in the scheme of things. We are now hitting the point where unless one of these players opts to concede, we are just looking at a draw.
So Huey is going to cast Jace the Mind Sculptor here. Looks like that's going to resolve. Huey takes the counter that represents the turns. So now we're reset back to 0 turns. So William has a couple extra turns now. Shane says, no way. We're back at turn 4. So yes, this is turn 4 now in Shane's. And again, it looks like we're going to draw here. Shane activates Mishra's Factory. Looks like we're going to get equipped with a Batterskull here. And he's going to play a land, equip it with Sword of Feast and Famine as well.
Just to make sure.
Just to make sure. Doesn't matter if we're going to draw, still want to do everything correctly.
Well, I think part of this is, we're in one of those positions where, based on tiebreakers, maybe one of these players wants a concession here if they don't feel like they can make it at X1 and 1. And both players are just trying to demonstrate, like, look, I'm winning this game right now. Look at the advantage that I have. I don't think that's going to end up happening here as the game is still very much in the air, but, both players just want to make it clear to the other that, hey, look at what I have going on right now.
Yeah, a lot of that could just been gamemanship. Like, listen, you're not guaranteed winning, so I'm not conceding.
Exactly. So
William Jensen and Shane Remelt, they draw this round, so they're going to move to 6-1 and 1. Again, still technically live for top 8, but it will come down to tiebreakers for both players here. So very tough match there for both players. Huey obviously looked to be in really good shape. Turn 1 Sensei Divine Top, turn 2 Counterbalance. Unfortunately, there's really not much you can do when you're starting the game with less than 10 minutes left.
Although Shane did a very good job of turning that game around, and it was, in my mind, still very much in the air. I think Jensen was likely to be favored to win that one ultimately, but Shane, with his unchecked equipment and Mishra's Factory, was actually starting to do some real damage there.